All right, Bob, we're ready to go. I'm going to share this in the background, so I'll take a minute here.
Okay.
You can start.
So I'm going to call the Education Subcommittee meeting for Monday, June 8th, 2020 to order. And I'd like to take an motion to approve the minutes of May 26th, 2020.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. So you can take a bit of time to review it. Does anybody need more time? Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, so that's passed unanimously. All right, so, and I think, the bulk of the meeting, I'm hoping will be focused on trying to prioritize agenda item number 3, update on remote learning, and, beginning some sort of discussion on district quality indicators, which we had discussed, much earlier in the year, and then administration was tasked with having a conversation about what those indicators might be that we could follow over a number of years. So, Bob, do you want to talk about number 1 first, impact of reductions?
Absolutely. So everybody's aware, I just sent out a revised agenda. I still need to add 1 or 2 people to it. But if you check your email, you should be able to see it. And I added a link to something that might help us to talk through this just a little bit. Let me just make sure I've got everybody here. Linda. Holden Cable, I don't have an email address for you, so I can't send it your way.
And I should point out that this meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Bob.
Sure.
So what for the implications of the class size reduction, tonight we're going to discuss in the full committee class size reductions. At the last business and finance, we discussed reductions, and those are broken out into several different scenarios or tiers, if you will. I wanted to talk to you about the implications of getting to 1/12, because that's really the only certainty we have right now, is that as of July 1st, we have to have a 1/12 budget in play. And so what does that mean if we get to that in terms of class sizes and those types of things? So the one area where I can't really give you an accurate picture is the high school, simply because it is spread across so many different courses up there. The reductions. So I can't give you any solid numbers there. I think in terms of the high school, what we can take away is that classes that we reviewed, for those that were on the committee earlier in the year, that had lower numbers, and by lower numbers, I mean 15 or less, you'll probably won't see nearly as many of those, and you'll see more in class sizes that are in those 20s and on up. In terms of the middle schools, I'll start with Central Tree, and their reduction to get to 1/12 would bring their average class size from about 20, where it is now, up to about 21. Feel free to stop me and ask any questions if you want at any point in time. I'll go through some of the middle schools and the implications there. Choxit, their reductions won't impact class size because it deals with a few of the non-core courses. That's where they were looking to go. So in terms of how we measure class size, it won't really impact that. I will tell you it won't impact necessarily the offerings, because the principal at Choxit decided that even though he would reduce a staff member, he would divide up what that staff member was offering amongst other teachers that he still has in play. At Mount View, in this first tier of reductions, it did not impact the normal classes that are there. It impacted some supplemental services and some special ed services where he believes he doesn't need a full-time teacher to meet what's on an IEP, but he needs a 0.4 teacher. So that's where Mount View has theirs. Paxton, however, there will be an increase to class size. He was using, because he's a K-8 now, so I'm talking from kindergarten up to grade 8. He was to get an extra teacher this year to help with a large class that's going to be entering grade 4. If he had all 3 teachers available, that would be a class size in grade 4 of 17 without that teacher, and with just 2 in there, the class size is around 25. So that's one area where it definitely impacts significantly, I would say, and I think you would agree to that. At Thomas Prince, the reduction there sits outside of the core
for
academics.
1 second.
Oh, go ahead.
What grade level was that at Paxton? That they
I believe
think
it's grade 4, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's where the bubble is. I think it's currently in grade 3 and it's going into grade 4. And what we tried to do, Bob, if you remember back to some of our conversations around the staffing plan, there's a bubble both at Paxton as well as in Thomas Prince. And so what we were looking to do was to go and add an extra teacher in both cases. Paxton also has a kind of unique situation where they're transitioning from 3 teachers per classroom to 2 teachers per classroom as the number of students drops off. However, there is this one bubble that's present, and that's what we're looking to address.
Laura, did you want to ask something?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification on the current situation. I'm assuming that those students are now in grade 3.
Yes.
Has their class, you said they had a 3-person model and they're going to go to a 2-person model. That's the normal progression from 3rd to 4th at that school?
Give me 1 second. I'm going to bring up some actual numbers here.
I'm just wondering, the reason for my question is just wondering, have they always had a very high class size, and this is just one more year of a very high class average for that grade level?
At Paxton, it's kind of unique. There's sort of 2 different groups of students in terms of numbers. There's some upper grade levels that is pretty consistent that they have some more kids in there. And then there's a drop off that happened a few years ago and it's been sustained. So for instance, in FY18, we reduced grade 2 from 3 to 2. In FY19, we reduced grade 3 from 3 to 2. And this past year, FY20 at Paxton, we reduced, I hope I'm getting these grades right, grade 4 from 3 to 2. What's happened is there was a grade that follows the reduction. So it was the year after that has grown steadily. So it's not that all of the grades were smaller. So in essence, what we should be doing is reducing 1 year, but then adding a teacher back in the next, and then reducing the year after that. So that if you're in a grade 3, for instance, you go to 2, the following year you go to 3, then you go back to 2 based on the student numbers. So that's what we're dealing with. What we started out doing before some kids moved in was just going to grade 2, and then from there on out, it would be grade 2 across the grade levels. So I might be 1 year off in what I'm telling you. It could be, the problem is the spreadsheet goes pretty wide. I think the bubble is coming into grade 4, but don't be surprised if it's really in grade 5. It's one of those 2 grades.
Okay, Megan Keller, did you want to add something?
Megan could tell us where that bubble is, because I'm sure it passed through her not too long ago.
Yeah, because she had indicated something about it being 2, but
Hi, sorry, I teach at Paxton, so that Bob's correct. So those kids have always been 2. And as they've gone up, like when I had them in 2nd grade, we each had 25. And then they went to 3rd grade and they were about 25, 26. Plus they have the language-based classroom that joins them for different parts of their day. So the hope was that that class would get turned into 3 when they went to 4th grade. So that's, Bob's correct. It's 3rd going to 4th.
Thank you, Megan.
I hope that helps. Thank you.
And so that's the Paxton situation. Thomas Prince, as I said, she was looking to reduce in some non-core academics. So her class sizes, that's what really this document I'm working out of measures, weren't really impacted per se there. Bob, the good news is that in the FY21 budget, that's the budget that you guys have currently voted on and that's in place right now, we added 2 new teachers. One went to Thomas Prince and one went to Naquag. She kept that extra teacher, but she reduces it when we move up a tier, not this one to get to 112, but when we go beyond that, she reduces it. So that does help her to keep that smaller class size with her bubble that's coming through in Thomas Prince.
Okay.
In terms of the elementary schools, now I don't have ECC on here because they're not doing any teacher reduction. So essentially we don't, and class sizes there are a little different because that's sort of by law, we only can fit so many in. I'll start with Naquag here. Naquag is looking to reduce either a kindergarten or a grade 2. And here's why we don't know that for sure right now. Our early indications are, and this is not just at Naquag, but across most of our elementary schools, the kindergarten enrollment that we're seeing right now is significantly lower than what we anticipated and significantly less than where we were at this time last year. So I think the whole COVID thing has really got families sort of stepping back a little bit and saying, you know, I might wait and see where they end up before I enroll my kid. It's not required that students go to school in public schools for a kindergarten. So we're seeing a lot less activity there. So as a result, if the principal at Naquag had to decide today, she would look at kindergarten. But in case those numbers go a little higher, she would be looking at grade 2. Either way, the difference is kindergarten would be around 21, which is a little higher than it is this year. Or if she goes to grade 2, the class size would be around 23. And she was looking at, when she had all her teachers, a class size of 19. So those are those numbers there. In Dawson.
Bob, can I just stop you for 1
Please,
minute?
Please.
Does the district have any strategy for how they might get better information from potential kindergarten families in terms of what they're thinking and you know, what their hesitations might be, or even if they're aware of the need to sign up?
Bob, to be real honest with you guys, I think that's something that we would have time to address coming up. And that could be something the end of June or early July that we really try to actively reach out to families. Right now, unfortunately, with the amount of staffing we have to look at things, we're pretty much up to our necks with reductions and bumping and all that sort of thing that we're looking at. So that's a great suggestion, and that's something I think realistically we'd look at pretty soon. And you're right, we need to be proactive and reach out. Brendan, did you want to add anything? Brendan is kind of the overseer of our K process here of enrollment.
Yeah, I've actually, it's been on our mind as well. I've spoken with Sandra Berquist, our lead nurse, and you know, it's something we want to look at about ways that we can, to the extent possible, reassure families that about what we're doing to keep kids safe, and that's all in the works as well. So it is on. You know, we have noticed the lower numbers, and the why is something I'm interested in finding out pretty soon.
Great.
So
Thank
can
you.
I ask a follow-up question on that? When you say kids, keep kids safe, now I've been on school council, and one of the concerns is, what does that safety mean? You can't expect kindergartners to be wearing face masks all day and sitting 6 feet apart. Whereas you may be able to expect that from 8th graders. So I'm just curious on what does that mean?
Yeah, and so that's actually, I'm going to be touching upon that with a task force little overview that I'm doing after. And honestly, the state and the country are in the works of what that would look like. We're just starting to get some guidance from the Department of Education of what safe would look like and what that would mean for kids. But that is all currently being worked on.
Awesome, but you're absolutely right. But the initial feedback we've gotten from Department of Ed is, even though the students might be pulling off their mask or can't keep it on, the expectation is that not for preschool, but for kindergarten on up, that they would be wearing a mask. So, and we know that's an expectation. It certainly isn't reality. So that's something that we definitely need to look into there.
Well, when you're looking into this, I just want to ask if you can also look at what the state has already done, right? They have requirements and curriculum for people who choose to be remote,
Yes.
and kids who choose to be remote. So they've done this for a while. So maybe taking their lessons and what they have learned and how they implement different grade levels and how they teach certain curriculum, I would think is a great place to start. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I know there's going to be a discussion on remote versus hybrid. And my input in that is, I think the more flexible we are to give these parents and kids to choose would be the best, right? I know, like, majority of us probably want all our kids to go back, as a hands-on, on-site learning. But there are situations where, in our school district, there has been issues where, for either social emotional reasons or bullying reasons, a child has decided to opt out and drop out of the whole school district. So if we offer, now that we've gotten into a system where we do offer remote, if we offer remote options, we may be able to retain these kids in some shape or form within our district, if they choose to, for whatever reason. It could be family situation, it could be anything. But
Yeah.
I really want to, I just want to make sure that we're talking about most flexibility as possible, rather than our end goal only being on-site learning.
Yep. Absolutely. That's a good point. And the state is basically telling us the same, which is, you might find that some families, some students choose to participate remotely for the beginning until we have an inoculation, and then we'll go from there. So, yep, absolutely.
And my guess is that probably would be some of the fact finding that Brendan and central office might be working on as they look at sort of those kindergarten numbers and why registration is low. So.
Yep, a good point, Bob. Shall I continue with Dawson?
Sure.
Okay. At Dawson, they're looking at kindergarten or grade 1 for the reduction. Kindergarten could be as high as 22 if they get the numbers they're expecting. It could be lower than that. And grade 1, if there's a reduction there, could be as high as 25. That's the highest of the elementary schools. Davis Hill is looking at grade 1, and that would go from 17 prior to the reduction to 23 after the reduction.
What grade level?
At grade 1. And let me just share this with everybody so that there's maybe it's for full disclosure in terms of reductions. So I said Davis Hill is looking at reducing one section or teacher's worth of grade 1. That doesn't mean that there would necessarily be a teacher cut in grade 1. It could be that there's another teacher at a different grade level that's cut, and then there could be some shuffling internally. What we tried to look at here as much as possible is non-professional status teachers. So let's just say that at Davis Hill, there's no non-professional status in grade 1. Well, the reduction could come from as far away as, I'm just going to pick a place. Maybe it's grade 5 or maybe it's grade 4 where there's a non-professional status, and therefore there would have to do some internal shuffling. So even though I'm going through the different schools here and mentioning specific areas, it doesn't mean that that's where the actual reduction will come from. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. At Mayo's looking at kindergarten. Their numbers were much lower than expected, and their class sizes next year, if they stay about where they are now, would be 16.8 with the reduction there. Glenwood's looking at grade 4, and in grade 4, that would mean going from about 19.6 to 23.7 with the reduction. Houghton's looking at kindergarten right now. Yep.
For 1 second, and so would they be looking at any particular classes that were really large? Because you're giving an average there, I think. Is that right?
That would be the average for the remaining section. So that's all I can do right now, Bob, is say like, oh, there's 100 kids going in and there's 4 teachers. So 100 divided by 4 is 25, for instance. You know, that's all I'm doing right now.
Okay.
The principal's trying to balance things as best as they can. There could be a grade level where maybe that teacher works, I don't know, better with girls that have anxiety about school. So there could be 2 more kids in her class than maybe someone else who works better with a different set of kids, for instance. So, but it'll be close to these numbers. Good question. At Houghton right now, it looks like it could be kindergarten, and with an expected class size of around 17.3 roughly. But once again, this is dependent on move-ins. So that's how I think this getting to 1/12 is going to impact the various schools and grade levels and those types of things right now today. And this is it changes weekly, I would say, is what you should probably expect. It depends on kids coming in. It's also going to depend a lot on what we have when we start to realize real revenues rather than just guesses that we have now. And so, internally, we do keep class size in mind. So, for instance, when I went through the elementaries, I said that Dawson, if they do reduce in grade 1, would have the largest of the average class sizes. That would then translate, if that was true, and that's where they made the reduction rather than K, that would translate into our top priority when money starts to come in. Like maybe we have enough money to add 1 or 2 teachers. Well, where are they going to go? They're going to go where the largest class sizes are, just so you're in the loop.
Thank you. And speaking of 1/12 versus more draconian budgets, any updates at all? I'm assuming we're going to hear about that at the regular committee, but.
Okay, well, I can give you a little bit of a preview here. So hold on 1 second. Let me bring up a different document in the background. Sorry, I got a lot of tabs open right now, and I'm trying to.
That's the story of our lives.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, indeed.
It's got to be up there. Essentially, what we did today was we looked at not only reductions, but I think the other part of that is bumping and where that might end up happening. So that's what I'm trying to dig up here. If you give me 1 minute. Here we go. So tier two is the reduction of staff. Let me back up a second. Tier 1 is non-staff reductions. So those would be expenses that we've now cut back on. Tier 2 is staff reductions. And the goal for tier 1 and tier 2 is to get us to a 1/12 budget, which is where we have to be by July 1st. In tier 2, as of today, maybe just an hour and a half ago, there are 13 non-PTS reductions there. So those are teachers without professional teacher status. There are no professional teacher status reductions because we've gone through the bumping scenario in there. And so any professional teacher status reduction was able to find a bumping into a non-professional status position. There's 5 retirements in that list as well. So we tried to grab as many of the retirements as we could grab. Obviously, in some cases, let's say you have an AP calculus teacher that retires, you got to get another AP calculus if nobody else within the department, for instance, could teach it. I'm not saying that's true, but and there's one position that was new to the budget that was reduced, and that ended up being a position at NAQUAG. After we do the 1/12 reduction,
Laura,
what's that, Bob?
Laura, I think, has a question.
Okay, Laura.
I do, but I didn't want to interrupt your stream of thought. So if you want to go ahead and finish, that's fine.
So what happens after tier 2, if we need to go lower, if we have to reduce more, in other words, we've identified some additional areas where we could reduce. Tier 3 then is more reductions to our expense side. Then we get back into staff. And so what we tried to do was to reduce staff to an area where we thought, oh boy, this isn't my idea of how schools should run, but guess what? It still could run. And then tier 5 is essentially having to eliminate programs and cut to the bone, and kids don't have anywhere near the same experience at all. So in tier 4, there's 24 non-professional status positions that are eliminated. There's 5 professional status teachers. In other words, there's no bumping. So maybe I have let's use that AP physics thing. Maybe I have a physics license and I can't bump because there's no other positions for that. So in other words, the professional teacher status, they can't bump in. There's no non-professional. And there's one position new to the budget that would be reduced. And that was at Thomas Prince, Bob. That's that other position there.
Right.
In tier 5, so this gets us to what business and finance asked us to get to, which is a $10 million plus reduction, or another way to think about it is it's a 20% reduction in state revenue. Tier 5 has, in addition to what you've already heard, there's 15 non-professional status teacher positions here and 1 professional status teacher position. So that's where we stand as of right now today.
Okay, Laura, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment. You know, in our first tier, we're saying that we're not cutting staff, but we are actually cutting the new positions that that were originally put in the original budget. And I believe that there are, was it 6 or 7 positions that are getting cut from that tier 1?
Yes, yeah, it could be 7, but it's 6 or 7. You're absolutely right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the public is aware of that. You know, when we say that we're not reducing staff at that point, you know, it's worthy just to note that we're not adding the staff that was even partially essential to getting us to where we needed to be. So, you know, I hate to, you know, beat a dead horse or anything like that, but I just want to make sure that there's full transparency on that.
Thank you for bringing it up. And yes, that's my mistake. You're absolutely right. There are staff reductions in tier 1. I think that in my head, it translates into, well, there's not people here that we have to contact and there could be bumping from. These are unfilled positions that we were hoping to hire this year, but that's a great point. You're absolutely right. And that includes for people maybe that don't, on the public, that don't know, when we're talking about where are the counselors, we were going to add elementary counselors. Well, that's where they were. They were going to be new to the budget this year. And by no means am I trying to say that the needs aren't still there. It's just a financial thing due to the COVID crisis we're in.
And I wasn't trying to suggest that you were not trying to communicate that effectively. I just wanted to remind us that we were doing that.
Yep. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have more to add, Bob?
No, that's just it. I know that tonight there'll probably be some discussion, so I'm trying to give you as much information around this so that maybe you could have a more informed or be able to answer maybe some colleagues who might not know some of this. If you have any questions about any of this, I'm happy to talk you through it.
Any other questions? Okay. So, Laura, do you want to talk about some of the things in that list? And I guess what I'm thinking is maybe we can, prioritize the subcommittee's focus on any of those particular areas. But the list of primarily that folks see in the update on remote learning were things I think that Laura was mulling over.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I did kind of have a lengthy list that I had sent to you a couple weeks ago. I guess, we've been doing remote learning now for quite a number of weeks with the potential that this could continue into next year. So I'm just, I'm mulling over questions around, the synchronous and asynchronous learning. I'm mulling, thoughts about how we deal with attendance policies related to health, not related to social emotional health, how we're going to address interrupted learning, especially if we're addressing, staff reductions in tier 2, tier 4, tier 5, God help us if we do. How do we even begin to plan for that and to, I'm not even sure what questions to ask, to be honest. These are just topics that I have. And all of those are really important to me, but it's almost difficult to know where to start.
So maybe I could offer this as a suggestion. The email that I sent everybody has this same agenda, but I added a link to what we're doing right now to start to maybe get some answers to this. And maybe Brendan could talk us through what we're doing so you could understand that we are beginning to do this, and we certainly can discuss in more detail any of these things at an upcoming Ed Sub meeting. So Bob, what's your thoughts around having Brendan share with us what we're doing as a district?
That's fine.
Okay.
Brendan, do you want to, are people able to open, because Brendan can share his screen, are you able to open the?
Yeah, and I think I also shared the screen too, since we were broadcasting this. So let me just give me one moment to do that. I'll be right there.
And Laura, I'm happy to circle back to any of these here. Some things, we'll get more information on as a state as we move forward, every week. So.
Okay. Can you see what I'm sharing?
Yes, we can, Brendan.
Okay. So this is just an update on what we began last week, which was our school reopening health and safety advisory task force. So just go through basically what the process is going to be. And so this task force is supplementing what we're already doing as a central office administration to plan for what next fall could look like. One of the pieces, there are so many pieces that are missing from our planning that we have not gotten the guidance yet from the state. We've just received some initial guidance on purchasing. So we're venturing into the unknown here, but really using a stakeholder group that's quite strong to do that. So the goals of the task force, I'll put these all up at once. Develop a set of recommendations for the fall 2020 school reopening that focus on these domains: student health, emotional, and academic domains. And we're actually going in that order at the moment. We're starting with student health and then social emotional needs. Reviewing available state and federal guidance for reopening schools in a safe manner. There are certain states that are kind of ahead of the game, Maryland being one. They have a very thorough document that is for reopening the school safely, which we're using in the planning. To collect and consolidate local stakeholder feedback about what is needed for a safe school reopening. So that's a really, really important piece. It's come up a couple times in this meeting as well, about how are we going to hear from constituent groups to hear what they're concerned about. Parents being a really, really important part of that. Hearing from parents about what's on their mind about the fall and really what they're worried about. I mean, the word worry is coming up a lot. We're just trying to lean into that and find out more about what people are worried about. And then to explore possible contingency plans for reopening schools. One that just came up was about what will school actually look like and what will the state allow us basically to do. I mean, the reason we could go to a remote model this past spring was because we were given permission to do so. Typically, time on learning is defined by time being in school. So if we were to go to anything with that kind of flexibility, that would need to come from the state to give us that kind of flexibility. So again, we don't know that yet, but we're waiting on that. And feel free to jump in at any time if there's any questions or comments. But just wanted to give you the categories of the people that make up the task force. This was done very intentionally to have a really good mixture of professionals that work in the schools, out of the schools, parents, and students. We have some high school students that are on this task force. It's a really, really strong group. We have 35 people that attended last week's initial meeting. And, we have a really, I think, this task force is absolutely the right makeup. So we're really trying to make sure we don't have any blind spots in our planning for next year, because this is all brand new to every school that's doing this planning. So by having all these eyes and ears on the document that we're creating, the recommendations, it's a way to make sure that we don't miss anything. We're going to miss something in the fall. We want to make sure that we are ready for all the big things that are going to come up. It came up also recently at school committee too, is that we do need to obviously look at the state guidance when it comes out, but we can't wait for it because the time is now to do this work. So we have a really, really strong group, and a lot of faith. I'll be facilitating as we go through and consolidating all the documents we come up with, but this is what it looks like. We have, from a trauma perspective, we have the director of the UMass Medical Trauma Training Center, who is also a parent in the district, who's working with our counselors and psychologists on the mental health kind of things. We have some parents, elementary parents and secondary, who are medical doctors that have been working in the field. They've seen firsthand some of the risks, and they're bringing that real world experience in. So I'm just very optimistic about the group we have together as far as doing this work. And again, just to say, this is going to supplement the work we're doing as a district. It doesn't replace it. Our central office administration, we've been working towards this, but we also know we need stakeholder input more now than ever. Just as far as process, it's a very ambitious timeline for us to turn around a final document to central office administration. Each one of these numbers represents a meeting. We just had our first meeting last week. So we were looking at just getting everybody started on their tasks, and I'll explain more of that in the next slide. Stakeholder input is a big part of what we're looking at now through surveys and possibly doing open virtual meetings where stakeholder groups could come in and just talk about what's on their mind. Surveys are great. They give us a lot of information quickly, but sometimes we can find out a lot more when we dig a little deeper. The third would be to develop frequently asked questions that would be a draft, but just to think about, to really predict what are people going to be asking about? What do parents and students need reassurance about for the fall? And then the fourth meeting will be our final document revision, and we're hoping to submit that most likely after July 4th, but we're really trying to turn this around as quickly as possible. I know one of the groups met last weekend, socially distant, but in a park, and separated themselves. There's a lot of energy around. Honestly, I think people have been holding back for a few months here, and there's a lot on people's minds, rightfully so. So they're ready to channel that into a document that will guide our work. So these are the different domains we're going to be making recommendations on. This is a busy slide. All of these leading into a communication plan that will involve two-way communication between school and home and community stakeholders. So you can just see as we go around, health and medical, mental health and social emotional learning, academic instruction, technology's big, our IT department has really stepped up over the past few months, as they always do. Transportation, food services, and then just all the general facilities pieces that are going to need to look at, including routines and procedures and cleaning and all of this. So we have 5 of these being tackled at the first meeting, and people are separated into their groups. We have small groups working on this, and they're mixed groups too. So students are mixed right in with administrators, doctors in the field, and that student perspective. I was really happy to see how active the students were in the first meeting, because it can be a little intimidating coming into a large group of professionals, we'll say, and adults in making recommendations. So just wanted to give that brief overview, because I know there, people are curious about the process, and we do have, Member Haber and Longalil here that are a part of that too. So we have started, which is a great thing. I'm happy.
So I'd really like to thank you, Brendan, for all that work, and I mean, clearly it's a massive task, and I also really appreciate the stepped up timeline of all of those meetings. And I guess I'm sort of thinking that even with Lauren's list, a lot of those things can be addressed right through updates with your group. I don't know how you feel about that, Laura, but.
Yeah, I actually was looking at your 7 categories there, and I see where each one of these items, whether it be synchronous and asynchronous learning, how we address that, attendance policies, all of those things tie very nicely into those 7 categories. I would imagine that professional development would be a piece of that in terms of instructional techniques and so forth, as well as how to address gaps in curriculum and things that were seen this year. So I think it's very comprehensive. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Looking at professional development, it might need its own box on here. It runs through all of these that we need to support the people working in schools to do that, this type of adaptive work. So that probably will become its own, my sense, but it will be embedded in all of them for sure. And but I appreciate that feedback. We want to make sure this is as simple as possible, but this work is not simple, and there's also no precedent for it. So sometimes, I know in my work, I can go back to my old bag of tricks, and it's all very different now. One thing that I think will be really important is looking at where students are, to your point, Laura. They're coming in with gaps for sure, and we know how to do that work. We're able to assess kids and find out where they are. And everybody's going to be impacted. Every kid is going to be impacted in a certain way. But anyways, we are looking at that.
Brendan, would you share with the group, maybe in terms of professional development? We had a meeting just a few hours ago, and we got some rough plans in terms of how we're going to move forward with our staff and what their needs are, and solicit that. And maybe you could even share a little bit about next year, what we're thinking of.
Right. Obviously there's been a lot of difficult pieces to the school closure. Of course, the worst of which, people being very ill. There have been some silver linings in all of this, and one of them is professional development really being thought of more broadly, is being asynchronous, being a little more driven by, we have teachers drive our PD quite a bit, but looking at ways that we could have professional development not necessarily happen on a day, but be spread throughout. We're exploring those possibilities as far as what that could look like for next year. I think there's teachers, from what I've been hearing, have appreciated a lot of the virtual opportunities that have come up too. So I think that's probably one of the positives that have come out of this, and it's very difficult to say there's anything positive about what's happened. But,
And so everyone's aware we're going to be surveying all of our teachers between now and the end of June. They can respond, and the survey will go out tomorrow. The Professional Development Committee pulled that survey together, so kudos to them. Brendan and I happen to be on that committee. The teachers did a fantastic job working through this. And so that'll help us to define what we're going to do next year, and if we're going to do a menu-driven day, as Brendan mentioned. Some of that might be that people are showing up at a certain day at a certain time, but also part of that might be now that it's being done through Google Meet or Zoom or something, so teachers could be at home, or it's on a Saturday morning or something like that where it's a little more accessible. So that's some of the good things that have come out of this big mess, is things like that. We're thinking outside of the box a little more, and people are more comfortable doing things remotely. So that's a good thing.
Laura?
Just one more point to make, and that is around students who are experiencing large transitional years. For example, juniors and seniors who are thinking about, college and applications and those big life decisions that they have. Those things, are going to be needing to be thought about, as well as on the other end of the spectrum, where we have kids who are in, preschool, transitioning into kindergarten, transitioning into, first grade. Those are big transition years for kids. And I just wonder, again, I don't have any answers, just questions. Like, I wonder how we help them in this remote learning environment, and what lessons we can learn from this year.
The good news is some of the principals have taken that on themselves and have held virtual welcome to my school. Here's what kindergarten is going to look like for parents that want to sign up and take those virtual tours. They get to meet at least the principal. We're not meeting a lot of staff because we're still only letting them in dribs and drabs to start to work in their buildings, but they definitely are spaced out physically around the schools. So that's the good news. But you're right, Laura, this is an opportunity for us to really look at that concretely and see how we could do a better job with that remotely.
Bob, I'm just curious, do the principals have an opportunity to share what they're doing in that regard with other principals to model?
Bob, I'm glad you asked that question. So another great thing that's come out of this is our principal meetings we have. We meet as a middle school group. Unfortunately, a lot of the work recently was around reductions and those types of things. But I feel that as a leadership community in Wachusett, we've grown much closer together while we've been remotely distanced. The elementary group gets together as well. Not only do they share what they're planning to do with tough things like budget reductions and those, we also have shared what they're seeing and want to see for PD, what they're doing for maybe, oh, did you try this app? This works great. Oh, here's a video I recorded. I'll help you to record one for your school. It's so easy, and those types of things. So I think sharing of resources, exchanging ideas, I think we're much closer than we were. And also, I think as a whole, the leadership group, the principals, we're much more inclined to use electronic resources now to search out what other people are doing outside of the Wachusett footprint and outside of the state. So that's been exciting to me. That's a really good thing that's come out of this. I know this is just not a good time and everybody looks beat up. They just do when you see the principals, but that's a good thing that's come out of this. Good question, Bob. Thank you.
Okay, so just a quick thing, because I want to give folks a chance to adjourn and take a short break before the other meeting. Bob and Brendan, the other item on that I wanted to get to was district quality indicators. And the question really is, did the district make any movement in that area? And so if so, I'd schedule another meeting maybe in 2 weeks so that we could focus on that. And do you want to just respond?
Bob,
And
I would
know
say
Sherry-
that we had good intentions, but when this kind of hit the fan in late February, we haven't focused on that recently. So that's something we need to circle back around to and definitely get on board with. I think that's just me being
Okay.
honest here.
Okay. Sherry, did you have a question or comment?
I do. I have a
Or
question. Soon the motion. With the DESI recommendation about keeping kids in the same classroom with the same teacher, have we considered taking the middle school and at least keeping the kids together and moving teachers around?
Sherry,
instead
we
of
haven't done that. We haven't done that yet. That doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We haven't done that yet. We haven't
It
had
just
those
seems like it would-
conversations.
it just seems like it would be quite a process to group the kids appropriately. I don't know what exactly that means, but still a process that would need to be started sooner rather than later.
It
So-
absolutely would. And the other thing that needs to start sooner than later is scheduling. And without knowing exactly how far we're cutting and how many teachers are in play, we don't know. Do we have how many sections of this or that? Do I still have this program in play, or do I have to now have kids go somewhere else? So everybody's anxious. But I think your point is well taken. This is a time where we need to look at student safety and not adult convenience, such as following an existing schedule that's worked for years just because we know how it works and everything. If it's safer to keep the kids in one location and rotate the teachers, then we certainly need to have those conversations and explore that.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor,
Aye.
please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bob Burlow.
Yes.
Let me stop the recording first.
Yeah, you can kill the recording now.
Yeah. Stand by.